So I've started recording. One of the things I want to talk about very first is I want to make sure that you all know that we will work with you if you're in one of the hurricane areas and you wind up getting a little bit behind. So don't let that scare you, and hopefully none of you will have any really bad weather to have to deal with. But I just wanted to say that up front just in case you do, because it was about this time last year that we had a hurricane, and then just a few months later we had another one, and some people got really discouraged with that one because there was so many things they were having to deal with. So I just want you to know that we will work with you and try to support you and help you get through whatever issues you have. So we hope that it will be a good situation and will stay off the coast and it will not harm anybody's property or relatives. All right, first of all, I want to say that there is one person that has still not completed the enrollment verification. And I have sent an email to that person, but I'm just saying this in case the person watches the videos to remind them that has to be done. And then there are 3 that I sent emails to this week that had not completed the contact information. And remember, that is the way that the attendance is being counted, is through the discussion board. So I want to make sure most of you are doing a great job and most of you are getting everything done early, and that's wonderful. But just wanted to make sure I mentioned that for the ones that are having some difficulty. So tonight, most of what I want to do is spend time on task 1 and what has to go into that and what has to be done before that and where you get your information. So I put some helpful hints that Dr. Stedman sent, and I posted it in week 2. The information about the annotated bibliography, I posted that in the week that you'll be working on that particular task. So those pieces of information have been posted, and remember, I try to do everything the week that you're working on it, or maybe the 1 week beforehand. So don't forget to use those weeks, because that will make your life easier. I put the assignments that are due that week. I try to put it to where you will get a reminder of what has to be done, or it may be, if it's a discussion board, it's linked directly from there, and you just go ahead and respond. All right, one of the first things that you might as well go ahead and get started doing is do your cover page. And I'm going to share my screen and hope I can find the correct one to show you. It is in your syllabus. So in your syllabus, it was around page 44 of the syllabus, is an example of a cover sheet. And this would be the cover sheet for just this particular AAPSL that you're working on. And so when you get ready to put the whole thing together, if you already have this done, then you don't have to worry about it. So you just have for your cover sheet where you are going to school, what program you are in, and then you have, okay, I'm jumped too far. I went too far, and then I went back too far. You have your name, and then this is the fall of 2019. And then you would have listed that it is the AAPSL. So you would label it Evidence 1, and the AAPSL stands for Analysis and Action Plan for Student Learning and Development. So that is what you would have on your cover page. So that's the first thing that you would need to go ahead and do and get it behind you. Now, that again is in your syllabus. It's near the end, and you can also find an example in an APA guide. Now, the second thing that you have to do, and I'm going to go ahead and screen down, and this one you will use over and over again. You will use the school profile in several of the different evidences. And what you need to put here This is just an example. It doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly like this, but this is an example for you to look at. But you're going to talk about your school and the community where your school is located. So you can use census data, you can use school report cards, you can use plans that your school put together, such as Title I, that has a lot of information about your school and the community. If you have volunteer people who come to your school and you keep a log of the volunteers, you can talk about the volunteers that come to your school. So this is to get information about how your school is and the community where it is located. And notice in this example, it tells you that it's an elementary school, and it gives you the approximate enrollment and tells where it's located and what part of the city or the state it's located. And then it has a transitional kindergarten that makes up the organization of the school, and then it has the number of people that are working there, and it talks about there's minimal turnover. So that lets you know that most likely this school is well established and the people are usually pretty happy there if there's very little turnover. Then it talks about the county. It tells the county where it's located, where it tells you what county you're located in. And the thing to remember here is this data can come from your census data. And you can find that often from your local Chamber of Commerce websites, or you can find it in websites about your county. And it tells you, and you don't need to give the total number of people in your county, but what would be in your community. And then what's the median household income. And then it tells more about the makeup of your school. So this school profile will be used over and over again. So you most often will put it at the front end of several of the evidences. So that's one of the first things that you need to look at. So now I'm going to try to get out of this. No, I'm not. I'm going to back up and get to where I want to talk about next. And that is the first one of the tasks that you're going to be working on for, and I just passed it. The first one of the tasks that you're going to be working on for the AAPSL. And when you do this, remember, this is where I said you don't need to make up and be creative. You just do exactly what is asked of you in this particular prompt and in this particular task. So the first task is talking all about PLCs. And it introduces it, but this is the important part right here. Prompt 1, you are to do it in narrative form, and you're to use APA, and you're going to describe the process of researching and developing the structure for a PLC. And then it needs to be supported by summarizing and citing the sources you've used. And it is important that the narrative not only include descriptions of process, but insights into actual PLC. And at the very end, I put a couple of questions for us to talk about. Many of you have always had some type of school-based meeting that you're working to improve, but is it really a PLC? And that's the reason you're asked to research it, to find out what a real PLC does. So you have to work with your school leadership, and they have to approve that you're going to do this, and you're going to research the tenets and functions of a PLC while you're also going to be in a leadership role, and you're going to develop and organize this PLC. And these are the 3 things that you're going to address in task 1. So if I were in your shoes, what I would do is I would label the first part of it as task 1, and then I would put professional learning communities, and then I would go to prompt 1, and then my subheading would be, there would be 3 of them: PLC research, PLC selection, and PLC meeting. So that is the way your first task needs to be organized. This is really not a hard one to do at all, because you're researching, and we have given you several things to look at. Also, if you go to DPI's website, and if we have a chance to do that, I'll share that screen with you. It has just a lot of authors that have done articles and information about PLCs. So you don't have to use just what we give you. That's a place for you to start. And when you look at some of those, then that's probably going to give you other ideas as to who you want to research to get your information. So under the first part, and that's going to be the longest part of this particular prompt, you're going to use at least 3 sources. I would probably use more than 3 because it says a minimum of. And anytime there's a minimum of, they're going to be counting to make sure you've used that. And so you make sure that when you use it, you reference it so that they know that you've actually done the research. And then you would list that reference at the back of your total paper, and at the back of this, as we're checking it, you would list that those authors that you used and fill them out according to APA, reference at the end. So what you're looking at is, what is a PLC? That's what you're doing in the research. It's to be written in APA format. And then before you go into the next 2 sections, you're to decide what your PLC is going to be doing and what its purpose is and what its design is going to be. And then the second subheading will be your PLC selection. And that will be the people that you have chosen to work together, or it may be some people your principals ask you to work with. And that will be who you put in your group. Doesn't have to be a large number of people. It can be a small group of people. But it's a group of people that are willing to look at your entire school and what the needs are for the school. And once you've looked at that, you'll actually be doing research further on as a PLC in some of the following ones to find out if what you think is the problem is truly the problem. And you're always using data. That's one of the things this whole entire program from 601 to 605, it focuses on the data that comes to your school. And if you're not using the data, then how do you know you're getting better? You don't, you're guessing. So in this selection, you want to talk about the people you've selected and why you selected them. You also give their strengths. And one of the things, you do not have to list their names. You can if they don't care and you don't care. But you can also list it as teacher A, social studies teacher, or the guidance counselor, or the assistant principal. You can list it by position. You do not have to use their names. Some people do not want their names used. And some people don't care. And so that's one of the things that you need to figure out, and when you talk with your PLC and see how they feel about that. So that's the second subheading. And then the third subheading is where you are actually leading a meeting. Excuse me. You're actually leading a meeting of your PLC where you've done the research to know what they're supposed to do. You've selected your people to be in it, and you have an idea of what you're going to be looking at. But that idea can change when you actually start looking at the data. And then you're going to have this first meeting, and you're going to discuss the vision and purpose of your PLC. So that is the third piece. Now, for this, I think it's important that you look at what's expected when you look at the rubric. So I'm going to move on down to the rubric now. And hope
Dr. Todd, excuse me, can I add a few things? Just
go right ahead.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. As Dr. Todd was saying, the first part where you're doing the research, sometimes, and it happens, I wouldn't say quite often, but it does happen. A candidate will mistake that part of telling what your PLC, about the PLC that you're in. The main part of that first section is that you want to show that you have researched and have base knowledge of setting up a professional learning community. There's some simple things in the professional learning community that needs to happen in that first meeting, the very first thing that you do. And I'm going to let you research to find out what that is. But don't make the mistake of telling about your PLC, but make sure that you show through the research and through those sources that you have knowledge of how to set up a professional learning community. And then you take that knowledge, that theory, if you will, and then you put it into practice. And you take that knowledge base that you developed after the reading and the research, and you use that to guide you in setting up your own professional learning community. So make sure that you show that you have done that research and that you do. You can use as many sources as you want to. As Dr. Todd said, the minimum is 3. I think 3 to 5, is a good number to show that you have a good knowledge of how to set up a professional learning community. And then you bring those people that you want to at the table. You discuss their strengths. That's a good opportunity for you to show off some of the leadership competencies that you're going to be required to demonstrate. Communication, delegation, even conflict resolution. If you get into that meeting, but you may want to delegate some of those members to do different things. And then when you have that very first meeting, some good artifacts that you may want to have to show that you to kind of support your narrative. You may want to have an agenda. You want minutes of that meeting, some notes from that meeting. All of those are really good artifacts that set that first meeting up according to your research, and make sure that you demonstrate that. Thank you, Dr. Todd. I appreciate you letting me put in there.
Thank you, and feel free to add anytime that you need to make it. We want to make it clear that we're both saying the same thing, and we want to make sure that you know exactly what you're supposed to do. All right, so now I showed you the description, the prompt. So I've moved on to where this is the rubric where your evaluators who have not seen any of the work that you're going to do when you get it all put together, this is what they're using. And this is the only thing that they're going to be using. And if it is not here, it will be sent back, or it will be given a score of lower than 3. And if it's lower than 3, you have to redo it. So this is a growth process where you're expected to reach at least a level 3. If you don't, then you're expected to redo it. If they should have to send it back when you get it to the final form, then they will tell you what is missing. But you should know that. If Dr. Bullis and I have told you what to do and we've guided you through the process, they're not going to be sent back. I can promise you that. We've had very few that have been sent back. The few that have been sent back were when the people chose not to listen to anything we said and did not make the corrections that we asked them to send in, or they picked an old first version and sent in only one of the tasks instead of the whole paper put together. So, if you actually pay attention to what you're doing and follow the directions and make sure everything that's in this rubric is completed, you won't have it sent back. It will be in good shape. And that's why we have the number of times that we look at it that I went over last week. So it is looked at so many times that by the time that it gets to your evaluator at the very end, there should not be an issue. But now proficiency, if you look at this, emerging would be a score of 1, developing would be a score of 2, proficient would be a score of 3, and accomplished would be a score of 4. You have to be at the proficient level for it to be approved and you move on. It can be higher, but it has to be here. Sometimes some of the things, not on this one, but in some of the ones later on, it's going to be hard to get a 4 because you don't have the time if you're a classroom teacher. you're a classroom teacher, you don't have the time to put in and do all of the things that it's going to ask you to do to get to the accomplished. So it is fine for it to be 3. You just want to make sure it is 3 or above. So if it is going to be a proficient, you have to show this research. It has to have 3 sources, and it has to be written in APA. So there are examples of places to hunt for APA on your websites, but also don't forget that you have a library tab that you can use for Gardner-Webb's library, and you have access to the librarians there, but you have to do it ahead of time if you want their help. So don't forget that you have that, and it's on your main screen near the edge, near the right-hand edge. And you are to talk about your PLC members, their roles, their strengths, and any other things that you think is really significant that will help us know why you chose the people that you did. And the last thing that has to be done is you leading the PLC in a meeting to discuss the vision and purpose of the PLC. Now that's to be a proficient. Now if you want to be accomplished, you do all of those first 3. And then you use basic technologies to communicate with other members of the PLC. So what would basic technologies be? Think about emails. You could show a copy of your email. It could be where you send them the agenda that you have done, like Dr. Bullis mentioned. So this is where you're looking for some documentation that you can use not only here, but you can use it in your competency folio, which Dr. Bullis will talk with you more about once we get into making sure that you are headed in the right direction with the tasks. So you can actually videotape it if your teachers don't mind. You can have somebody take a picture of you all working together. You can show the screens that you're using with a picture or a video. So there's a lot of different technologies that you can use, and you can use some that's just very simple, where you're communicating with the members of your group, and you can take a screenshot of that so that you can show that you've done it. So I want to stop right there and see if you have any questions related to task 1. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. All right. I want you to look at your agenda. I'm going to exit this share. I want you to look at your agenda. You will find this also in your syllabus. It says during the completion of the entire AAPSL, you are to address the following 8 competencies. And again, Dr. Bullis will talk with you more about these, but they are communication, change management, delegation, dialogue, judgment, systems thinking, technology, and visionary. Now, in addition to those 8, you choose 4 additional ones. And the 4 that you can choose have to do, come from the total list of 21 competencies. Now, I put all 21 of those competencies in your syllabus. So you have access to all 21 of them. So you will do, these 8 are required as you complete this particular task, or not all of, not this task, this evidence, the AAPSL. And then you also select 4 that you'll be working on as you go through. So I want to make sure that you understand that the competencies that you'll be working on, you will talk about them in task 5, but you will also be dealing with them where you show your evidence of them in your competency folio. So task 5 and your competency folio are 2 different things. They're looking for 2 different things. The competency folio is looking for the evidences, the actual agendas, the actual pictures, the actual YouTubes. the competency, the task 5 is your reflection. So, and it's where you're talking about internship activities you're doing, as well as class activities and the development of the actual evidence that you're working on this semester. So I want to stop right there and see if you have any questions. Do you have any questions about anything? All right, Amy?
I do. So the due date for task 1, it said week 3. So is that the Sunday of week 3?
Yes.
It's an ongoing.
It's draft.
So meaning every part of it should be addressed, and then we're building to it, or just it's a working progress?
All right. Your task 1 draft should be basically what you consider to be finished for task 1.
Okay.
Because you're gonna, the building comes in the other task, but when you do the research, you choose your committee, and then you have your meeting, that's done. And you're doing your draft. Now, it's very possible you will not have had your meeting by the time you get your draft posted. That is fine. You just put a note and you put PLC meeting. We've not had time to meet yet. I will address that later and let you view that when I turn in a revised version. But your draft will be posted where your 2 peer reviewers, which I will be assigning by the end of the week, your groups. I'm trying to find out whether or not 1 or 2 students are still in the class because I can't get any response from 1. And I'm trying to make sure they're still in the class before I assign them to a group, because that messes your groups up when that happens. So you do the best you can to get your draft as close to finished as possible.
So that is by the 15th at 9 p.m.
Yes. Yes. Okay. In other words, this is the beginning of week 2. So you have this week to work on it, and then whatever the date is that's listed, that's when it's to be posted there. Now, I think I gave you more time to get started, and then I think they're going to start coming in rather quickly after that. You'll be finishing up one, and another one will be being started, and that kind of thing. But I wanted us to make sure we got the first one where everybody understood and we were in good shape. Scott is sharing that we are out of school due to the hurricane, and that is fine. We will work with you. We understand that. Just put that note in when it comes to PLC meeting. Just put that note in there. The other thing that you can do is if you feel comfortable enough doing it, you could, which is not ideal for the first meeting, but you could have a Zoom meeting and go ahead and get your, at least the vision chosen that you're supposed to. So like I said earlier, and Scott, I'm not sure whether you heard it to start with, but we will work with you. We understand that when it's weather, there's nothing that anybody can do about that, but we will work with you. So thanks for letting me know that that's one of the things going on with you.
And if you do a Zoom meeting, as Dr. Todd said, I think that's a great example of using technology to reach out to your team, especially in a situation like that. But make sure that you record that. I can help you if you don't know how to move that over to YouTube, and you will learn soon enough. But I can help you with that. That's a good artifact. That's a good artifact of your leadership competency. So if you do that Zoom, just make sure that you record it and save it, please.
And he is right. That is exactly what you need to do. All right, Megan, did you have a question?
Yes, I sure do. Thank you. The school profile that we're going to be creating, should that also be submitted with task 1?
Yes. Let us
Okay.
look at it. You won't have to
Add that to it.
Just add that to it.
Fabulous. I didn't see that in the rubric. And another question, Dr. Bullis, I noticed in an email that you shared with us, you recommended that we include a reference to the DeForge. Is that a requirement as one of our resources?
No, it's by no means a requirement. I think somebody had mentioned something about some people to look at, and You know, I grew up in the initial start of professional learning communities, and at that time, Rick and Becky Dufour and Bob Eaker were on the cutting edge of it. So no, it is not a requirement by any means. Good question.
Appreciate your clarification.
But
Sure.
they are good resources. So.
They definitely are. Yes, I've met them before. I hate we lost them.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? All right. I know that part of the issue that you're going to be wondering about is what is all this peer reviewing and what's the purpose of that? So I wanted to address that tonight. So hopefully I can find the peer review somewhere. I had it ready, but I don't see it right now. Let me go back to the syllabus and see if I can find the information on the peer review. I may have it here. All right, is this opening up for you to see? Okay, all right. This is all in your syllabus. And I was thinking there was a section on peer reviewing in here. I took it and actually I copied it for you if I can't find it real quickly. We'll go back and let you look at your agenda for tonight. But let's see, here's the Zoom conference. Here it is. All right, with the peer review, this will be done in your groups. And that's the reason we ask you to put your draft in discussion board. That way I can see it, and then whoever is in your peer review group can look at it. Now, one of the first things that you will do when you have that first Zoom conference, and I think I put that for 2 or 3 weeks down the road, you are to decide who you're going to be reviewing and whether you're going to review the same persons each time. You will review 2. Each person will review 2. Now, the good thing is they have lowered the number of peer reviews you have to do. And when they first started with the peer reviews, you had to do a peer review for each one of the tasks. But they have now, you still do the peer reviews, but they now only have a Zoom conference for the first 2, and you do those together. So while you're still doing the peer review for the first 4, you only do the Zoom conference and you do 1 and 2 together. And then that's where you videotape that through Zoom. If you will look, this is what your peer review is to look like. Now, you can choose to use those numbers if you want to, and it explains what they are. But what I'm more interested is what you write here. When you are looking at the requirements.
Dr. Todd, I apologize for interrupting you, but the syllabus didn't come up on the share.
Okay, the syllabus did not come up on the share. Okay.
Yeah, it looked like it was opening up, but it never did come up.
Okay. All right. Then let's go to your, I'm going to stop the share. Let's go to your agenda for tonight. If you will pull that out and look at it. I think it's about the 3rd page. And thank you very much, Dr. Bullis. Sometimes that happens to me. If you will look at the sheet, you give your name, and that's the person doing the peer review. And then you are writing the author of the paper you're reading. So that's the information. So the first one is your actual name, and the second one is who's you're reviewing. And then you also list which task you're working on. Now, I am more interested in the feedback part. Now, one of the things that is not very helpful and happens a lot of times is people will say, everything looks good. Well, I want you to put your teacher hat on. When you are reviewing something for a high school student or for your students and they're trying to learn, do you tell them everything is good, or do you mark the problems, or do you tell them, okay, this is what's missing? You need to put your teacher hat on while you're working on this, because it is really important that your people that you're doing this for get your information, because it can help them make sure that they meet the rubric. Now, Dr. Bullis and I will be doing the same thing, but we won't use a peer review form. We will just make comments. That's what I do, is I make comments where you turn it in discussion board. Whenever I first read it, I'll make comments on the same screen. There's a comments section, and it allows me to make comments, and then I'll give you the points for doing the work. So that's where you'll find my information, and Dr. Bullis will do his, and we'll all give you feedback. Then, before you submit it the second time, then we expect you to have made these revisions, including what your peer reviewers have asked you to do. So the questions that are there is the content aligned with course content? Does the knowing influence the doing? Then is the language of the rubric used to examine the text for areas of strength and comment? And so all of those are things that you're looking for. It does ask you to look at mechanics. It asks you to look at grammar. It asks you to look at organization, and one is there about APA formatting. So if you're going to comment about APA formatting, what does that tell you? You better know APA formatting. And I can tell you that where over the years where I've had the most issues with APA formatting is in the reference page, and often with whether or not you follow what they want you to do as far as whether it's double spaced, single spaced, or whatever. APA usually recommends double spacing throughout the entire paper. And it doesn't say that when you have a subheading, it needs to have more spaces. It's usually double spaced all the way through. So you really need to know some APA. And I don't do everything online. That's a good source, but I bought the book. And that way I can be working on it, and I can go back and I can look. And this is the most recent one that I had. I don't think another one has been done since that one came into play. It was the 6th edition. And it has examples just like the example that I put in your notes and also in the syllabus. So that's the form. And when you fill it out, I don't need all the other stuff that goes with it. I just need that top part, the part that says the task, just that one page where you're making the comments. So when you have your small group Zoom meeting, once I set your groups up, then you decide how you're going to review them, whether you're going to review the same ones each time or whether you're going to rotate doing them. But you do 2. Each one of you peer reviews 2. Then after you have peer review 1 and 2, you will have your meeting with Zoom to talk about what you all saw, and you take the time to talk about that. In your first Zoom meeting, which is done during week 3, you are to develop policies that deals with issues. Now, yes, you all are graduate students, but I can tell you that some of the people in your group may not carry their weight, and that may throw you off and get you in a bind. And so if that happens, how are you going to handle it? Your group needs to come up with procedures for that. And of course, let Dr. Bullis and I know that that's going on, so that we won't think you're the one that's behind when it might be somebody else's fault in submitting some of these things. For example, if one of you did not turn in task 1 until a week later, you're not going to be able to have the peer reviews done when it might be due. So you're going to throw the whole group off. So that's why, as much as possible, you need to stay up, or let your, the group that's out of school, let your group know what's going on so they know what to expect. And that way they won't get excited and they won't get nervous about not having what they need to be doing. Let Dr. Bullis and I know the same thing. So some of the examples of things that you may want to come up with how you're going to do it is a person misses a Zoom session. They fail to provide feedback. They believe someone is plagiarizing something, but they don't note that. You're not getting quality or substantial feedback. How are you going to handle all of that? The Zoom master doesn't share the link after a meeting. So all of those are things that you are supposed to decide in your first Zoom meeting. And then there's some peer review tips and suggestions. And I think these are really good ones. Don't discuss grades with one another. If you follow the rubric, you're going to get a high grade. That's bottom line. We grade based on rubric and whether you do what it's being asked to be done. And so there's not a point in discussing grades. Learn how to give negative criticism with a positive outcome. In other words, how do you say something needs to be improved and get the person to do it without hurting their feelings? So those are some things to look at. Read the rubrics very carefully. Look at every word and every phrase. Don't do most of it and expect positive results. And never forget that the program is designed to develop leadership skills through competency development. So those are some things that are suggestions when you're doing your peer reviews and when you're doing your Zoom sessions. So the next thing that I did, I took Dr. Lamb's original, and he had submitted the one for both the AAPSL and the AAPTL. You all do not do the AAPTL, you do it during the next class. So this is the one you look at, the one that is on your agenda today. Do not worry about what he has, because he's going to be pushing you through a lot faster than you need to, because it's for the add-on class. It is not for your class. So week 4 is when you will have your first Zoom meeting. That's where you're going to have you set up your schedule and policies. The next Zoom meeting will be in week 6, and that will be where you will discuss tasks 1 and 2. And your last Zoom meeting, small group, will be the case study, which is week 7. Now, some of those other dates I may not have gotten changed exactly right, but those are the 3 to pay attention to. So we are through that peer review process. Dr. Bullis, do you want to add anything else to that?
No, ma'am. Thank you. I think you covered it very well.
Okay. Now, do you all have any questions about the peer review process? I want to make sure that the big items that we cover, that you have a chance to ask questions about them. Okay, either we're doing a good job of explaining, or you're getting so much thrown at you, you don't know what to ask. So if that's the case, send us an email. That is fine. We don't mind. Okay. One of the things that you read about last week, since we're having our Zoom sessions the week after the week, the very first of the week, I go back to the previous week to look at at the things that you read, and that's where I will get the discussion questions. So you all had some reading to do on PLCs. So after that reading, what do you believe are the most important components that's going to help your PLC meet the goals you set for it? I had 2 questions for you to think about, so that I wanted us to talk about. So what do you think are the most important components that's going to help you meet the goals that you set for yourself? This is last week's reading. We went over a little bit of it when we talked about the 3 big ideas at the end of last week's session. And those 3 big ideas are that the purpose of a PLC is that you're to ensure that students learn. That's the first big idea. The second one is that it's collaboration, and you're collaborating to get school improvement. And the third idea is that it is focusing on results. And when you think about PLCs, have the ones that you've been involved in, have they been doing those things? Someone needs to talk. Guy?
I think generally the PLCs that we do sometimes become more of share sessions, and I think it loses focus on the data and being data driven. So I think that's something we really need to focus more on, at least the ones that I've been involved in through my area.
I would, based on what I know about them, I would say that you hit a lot of the issues that most people deal with. They do become sharing sessions, and one of the things as we go along and look at these other tasks, you're going to be asked to provide strategies that will help your teachers be successful and improve. So if you're not looking at the data and you're not looking to research for what are good strategies, then it just becomes a guessing session. And then all of us know that what works with one group of kids does not always work with another group of kids, but you can still hopefully have some possibilities that might help someone. All right, what about something else? All right, Amy?
Our principal had talked to us about going to see what other people are doing. Because we're in our rooms, so we don't get to go out and visit and see other teachers and how they're doing it. And then when we meet, we can discuss different strategies, what's working. We can take that data and then say, okay, well, maybe this child needs to, hear it this way, or even do some flex grouping and take the data and move around that way, and see who needs additional help in what area, what standards, that kind of thing.
And that's good. I wanted to share Amanda's comment. She says she said a practice is loud, but she wants to make sure everyone has a common goal and sticks to working on it. Just because something doesn't work doesn't mean you should stop and give up, but maybe go in a different direction with different thinking. And I think that is also very appropriate. And the whole point is we're wanting our schools to improve. We're wanting our children to learn. And so that's why the three big ideas are part of the PLC. A lot of times when I first heard professional learning communities introduced, I thought, well, okay, this is very similar to department meetings, but it's not. It can be, a department meeting can be structured that way, but they're not always, because there's so many details that you have to take in account for, and some of it is just managerial rather than actually looking at the data. All right, anybody else have any comments about professional learning communities?
I got a little something.
Okay.
Let's see. On page 32, I underlined this. I just really loved it. It said the principal connects people to outcomes rather than rules. The key to effective leadership is to connect workers tightly to the ends, but just loosely to the means. And I really like that, because as English teachers, those are my people, nobody wants to be compartmentalized. Nobody wants to be taught what to teach every single day, because we have our own passions and interests and things that we want to dive into. But a PLC is a really great way to thread something common, looking at standards. We can teach those same standards throughout the week and still do it our own way. So the PLC is a really great way to bounce ideas off of each other and, just really get creative loosely, but still have the same end goal.
And that's wonderful. And then Amanda says the reason you're in the PLC is to strengthen your weaknesses. And if you are weak in one area, someone else may be stronger. So you have to think outside of your box and may be uncomfortable for results. And that is very true. When you get new teachers in your school, you want them to be successful, correct? And so, yes, they have a mentor assigned, but sometimes the one who's not their official mentor is the one who helps them the most. And that could be the classroom teacher next door, or it could be the person across the hall. So you want everybody to do as well as possible, because you're doing it so the children can learn. And Megan, I like what you chose. I thought that was really good too. All right, anybody else have anything to add before we go to the next question? Anybody else? Yes, Jonathan. Okay.
Sorry, I got it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, currently my school, we are focusing. We actually just finished up with MAP testing. I'm sure everyone is probably familiar with that. And my concentration right now is 6th through 9th grade. And this week we will be focusing on pulling that data. This is our first year actually utilizing MAP growth assessment. And so this is going to be a huge learning curve for our teachers as well as administrators. How do we implement it? How do we align our instruction? Last year, we spent quite a bit of our instructional time focusing on areas that really didn't strengthen our students and really identify their weaknesses and build them on that. So my expectation and sort of kind of going forward is within our PLC, within those learning communities, how do we continue to take the learning continuum that MAP provides for us, how we focus on those differentiation in small groups, and really being detailed with what we are doing within our instructional time. So that's one of the focus areas.
Well, and it also may be a strategies
Yes.
that work really well for groups, because that may be a piece that you are going to have to look at is the strategies and what will help in this particular area once you identify what the weaknesses are. That's good. All right, anybody else? All right, the last question, and we've got 9 minutes before our hour is up. And it says, and I mentioned you've got many small groups that meet in your school, and they often go by the PLC name, or they may have other names. After reading the information, do you believe those groups already started in your school are actually professional learning communities? Why or why not? And I think we talked a little bit about that in your answer to the first question. But when you think about the groups that are purported to be PLCs, do you think they really are? And if they're not, why are they not? Yes, Jonathan.
And from the past, I just believe if you're going with, and if you're working within a PLC, you have to have some sort of outline or guide to help assist or coach along your team, so you can have a focus area and that you can really accomplish. I've been in meetings where there's just many of sharing, like I think God mentioned, just a lot of sharing ideas, but also just having an outline specifically. So there are many teams. I agree there are many teams that within the organization also believe with a central focus and sort of an outline or a guide, those help within that PLC.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? Crystal says, many times our PLCs aren't focused on a goal. And they do need to have a goal. You need to know what you're working toward to improve. Anybody else?
I'd like to say, this is Deanna, but I don't know, my video is not showing up. So if you guys can see me, great. But if not, I'm just going to talk.
Go ahead and talk.
For my school, I feel like our PLCs that are high functioning are the ones that do truly look at the data and then use that to drive their instruction. But there is definitely PLCs that meet with good intentions, but they never look at the data to see if they're actually growing as a team and helping the school community or being effective. So I think the biggest problem is not using the data or knowing how to use it for some of those teams.
That's a good observation. All right, anybody else have a comment? Jonathan?
I have a question actually. What if it's not a, let's say it's a PLC, but it's on operational side of the school. Are you looking at data? I mean, what should be your essential focus? If it's not data driven, which we're constantly thinking about with our teachers, but what about outside of those PLCs, something outside of that?
Are you thinking about like management overall, to and from class, buses?
Daily, yes, daily operational. If you have a group of, you just have a group of just, daily operation. I think that would be good.
Okay. All right. I would say that you still have data you can use.
Okay.
It may not be as clear as test data, but think about, if you look at your overall operation, when most people are coming through for either the entrance or the car line, you need to change that car line. Is there something that you need to do where the buses come in? Look at the safety pieces. Have people fallen? Are they coming in too fast? Look at your accident reports. There's a lot of things on the overall operation pieces that you can look at that will give you data. And it may not be what you would think of, but when you're looking at management, you're wanting everybody to get from one place to another as safely as possible, and you're wanting them to get there. So you look at where you have issues. I can even remember back when I was a principal, we had no issues during class time with our middle grades kids. The only issues we ever had was with transitions, and it's when they were changing classes. So you start looking at where the problems are occurring, and that gives you your data, and then you start trying to figure out how you can fix some of those issues. So it can still use data and still be a PLC where you're trying to improve for the safety of all the school. So PLCs can be used for many different things. Most often you think of them with the classroom and strategies and improving that kind of thing in the classroom. But it can also, you can look at your safety data, you can look at your accident reports, you can look at when kids are getting in trouble. And you can take that data and then look at your management procedures and see if you do have some issues with the management procedures that are going on. And if there are issues, then fix them when you have a chance to. You might not be able to fix them until the beginning of another semester because you've got started with a set of rules, and you might even not get to fix them until the next school year. But it's early enough in this school year that you could probably fix them if you needed to. Did that answer your question? All right, anybody else have a question? All right, I'm going to stop the recording, and if anyone has a question you want to ask that you don't want it recorded, I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stay on for a few minutes.